Welcome to panel 4 during the NFLC Virtual Summit. We're here to talk today about the tell domain of the learning experience. And I'm so excited to have 2 of our presenters and 2 additional panelists who will share their experiences. And I will let them introduce themselves. George, why don't you get us started?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is George Chahwan, and I am the chair of the language department at Choate Rosemary Hall. I teach Arabic and French.
Liz?
Hi, my name is Liz Matchett. I'm a Spanish teacher at Gunn High School in Palo Alto, California, and also the instructional leader for the World Languages Department.
Betsy?
Hi, I'm Betsy Sandstrom in Fairfax County, Virginia.
And Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Toth. I am a Spanish teacher at Salem Community High School in Salem, Illinois, and an author at Fluency Matters.
And I might just have to ask you to do this whole thing again, because Brian, I'm hearing we're not having sound.
Oh.
We're good now. All right. You want to do introductions again?
Sure.
Yeah,
sure. All right. So if you heard us, great. If not, here's a fantastic team of panelists for panel 4. We can just go in reverse order. Carrie, why don't you start?
I'm Carrie Toth. I am a Spanish teacher at Salem Community High School in Salem, Illinois, and an author at Fluency Matters.
Hi, I'm Betsy Sandstrom, and I'm a Russian teacher at Thomas Jefferson High School in Fairfax County, Virginia.
Maybe you can bring the charger. I'm going to try to get it on.
Liz?
My name's Liz Matchett. I am a Spanish teacher at Gunn High School in Palo Alto, California, as well as a team leader for the Stanford World Language Project.
Hello again. I am George Chahwan. I'm the chair of the language department at Choate Rosemary Hall, and I teach Arabic and French.
Right, thank you. Let me just explain how this works. We're going to begin with some general questions around the tell domain and some of the themes that were brought up in the sessions that premiered this afternoon. And while the audience listens, we invite you to submit questions through the Q&A chat box. Before you submit your question, you might want to read through some of the other questions that some people have already submitted, and you can just upvote questions that you like. So if you have a similar question, or you see a question somebody already asked that was exactly like yours, just click on the thumbs up, and then we know we really want to have that question answered. So the chat box in Zoom as well as YouTube will be open. However, we're not going to monitor it. So you can use that particular box to share your comments, to your reactions to the conversations. We will try to include as many questions as we can. So let's just begin with the very first question. And that is not an easy one, actually. So I'm glad that we have the fantastic panel here to talk about it. But how can we ensure that our class content is relevant to our learners? And who would like to get us started? George, I see you're shaking your head. You ready with an answer?
It's a very important question. It's a key question, I think, and it ties well to community. And I think the first question I would ask myself as a teacher is, how well do I know my students? Have I put myself in their shoes? Beyond their names and where they come from, who are they and what matters to them? I would ask myself these questions. And I think it's very important to try to bring to the classroom activities and strategies that kind of resonates with them. Most of the times as teachers, we are so excited about an activity or about a project that usually resonate with us, but it's not of interest to our students. So I think to start there is key.
Building on what George says, I agree with that. And I want to point you towards a session that I watched this morning by Bertha Delgadillo. She gave some really good ideas about how to get to know your students and to build community in your classrooms, such as using surveys and polls that we can be using in these Zoom rooms that we have to be in, or these other online communities.
I agree with that, because as we go into the possibility of not getting to know them face to face like we're used to, getting to know them and have that community starting at the beginning is going to be so much more important. I saw on Twitter, somebody tweeted the other day that kids around the world love Elmo and he's on the screen. So we can still make them love us like kids love Elmo, but we do have to make that personal connection with them.
And I think we have to be really careful about making some assumptions. Sometimes we think getting to know our students, we do a similar activity that worked year after year. I changed an activity to meet needs of students one year because we start with colorful folders. They all wanted to choose their own colors of folders. And then right away, they learned a complicated task in Russian and they felt very proud of it. So I tried it again the next year thinking, oh, it'll work just fine. But I didn't get to know all of my students the way I should have before trying the activity. And one of the students was colorblind. The activity meant absolutely nothing to him. So luckily, he was somebody who spoke up and he became sort of the leader of the activity. And it was important to him to actually learn the words. So I think learning who our students are as much as we possibly can through all of those surveys and activities is really important at the very beginning.
I am so glad you are bringing this point, Betsy, because this brings back to mind, in fact, one of the quotes from Emily Style, the co-founder of SEED, which is Seeking Equity and Educational Diversity in the Classroom around the world. She says, no student acquires knowledge in abstract. Learning is personal. And I think we need to know our students and always think about the windows and mirrors, the concept from SEED about like how do students see themselves represented in these activities that we have in our classroom.
Mm-hmm. Listening to what you're saying makes me think also that it's getting to know your students isn't something that you just do in the first week of school. You do it throughout the year and continually and deeper. And especially if you have a student that you feel like you don't know very well, that's where you need to make the effort to reach out to that student and their family and find out about them, talk to them, perhaps reach out to them personally, especially now that we're home and you can't see them and see their body language. You need to find ways to make sure that you know every single student that you have.
So true, and say sometimes listening is very important. Sometimes we don't need to have that conversation if we are observant and listening to what they are saying in the activities, in the assignment, in their paper, in their responses in the classroom. This will give us some hints to what really matters to them and what they are going through.
So how do we make that then the content of our classes? I heard you talking about community. I heard you talking about making personal connections, learning as much as possible about your students, not just in the beginning of the year, but throughout the year. So how does, a teacher who is concrete, sequential, and likes to know all the outcomes for the whole year, or just needs that kind of planning? How does that become? How do you then keep that relevant? How can you bring that into the class?
Can I start? Is it okay if I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think one thing I'm trying this year, it's really important for me to plan a lot ahead, but be very flexible with those plans. So I want to be ready, like for that first day activity that I described. I want it all set. I want to be ready for it to have to take a quick turn at any moment, and be ready for that and look for when I have to make that quick turn. So for this year coming up, we didn't know if we were going to start virtually or face-to-face. So my students from last year wrote letters and cards to the new incoming freshmen to welcome them and give them a chance to reach out to one of them to let us know who they are before we actually begin the school year. Or at the beginning of the school year. So that's for us going to be building that virtual community, kind of having a big sister, big brother in our Russian language program. And a lot of kids are nervous about signing up for a language like Russian. Their parents are telling them it's difficult, you're going to have a hard time with it. So they're already nervous about it. So we want them to feel more comfortable. It's setting a community, creating a community, just with these baby steps, and we see how they respond to those cards. What if they feel uncomfortable getting a card from somebody they don't know? I have to be prepared for that. They might not be ready to respond to it. So I'm on the lookout for all of those things right from the start.
Building on that, one of the things I usually do in a regular year with one of my classes, I do a lot of curriculum in the garden, because I think kids should be outside and they should be exposed to sustainable food practices. This is also part of social justice and also the sustainable development goals. But I've been thinking, how am I going to change that since I can't take the kids as a class into the garden? And the first thing that we do is the previous class plants potatoes for the class coming in, and then we go and harvest the potatoes. So I can't do that this year, but what I can do is I can still have the kids get potatoes. I'm pretty sure most of the students will be able to do that and still do that lesson. So I can start from there. In other words, I have to really think about how I can modify my curriculum this year and still be true to what I care about and what I know works to build community, but do it virtually.
I'm going to follow up what Liz said I did National Geographic certification 2 years ago. And one of the things that I learned from that, we do a lot with the Sustainable Development Goals, and the kids get really interested in those lessons. But through National Geographic, I learned that they look at these spheres, like they can see the bigger worldview, but sometimes you have to bring the sphere. Okay, this is water crisis might look like it's the big wide world, but here's how it affects people right here in our country. And here's how it affects people in our community. And so just trying to find that focus in my lessons, how I can still bring the focus back to them, even if I may not be face to face with them, like you're not, Liz. Like, can I take that lesson that I would do outside face to face with them and make it meaningful still virtually?
We can't hear you, Thomas.
I think Thomas is having trouble with his audio. We are unable to hear him.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so maybe
while they work on Thomas's audio.
I had a question. I had an example to share. For example, in one of my classes, a student was very interested in architecture. So I built a whole project around that, and they had, for example, to research a different architectural style in the Arabic world and come up with a design to an Arabic house, and then try to put it on the market and sell it and say whose group or target is. Is it for a businessman? Is it for like a family who is seeking to rent an apartment, for example, somewhere near a college or a state? And for example, an Arabic family who is coming to Wallingford, and where could they stay? What would be appropriate for them? But in fact, to build community, and also it's not important for us to just get to know our students, but for the students to get to know each other. So what I did is I took a step backward, and I started with the students presenting who is their favorite architecture and why, worldwide or from their own culture, and talk about something to get to know a little bit more about them. What do they value? What it is something that they see beautiful or not? And it was a great opportunity for their peers, in fact, to get to know them on a topic that maybe they haven't discussed together in the classroom.
I love hearing these ideas that we are using in our classrooms. And what I keep hearing is that people are designing tasks. And I think it's important to bring that up, that's another thing that helps build community, because the kids see things that are real, things that you would actually have to do in the language. And they see their peers doing that, which makes them engage, which makes them want to be there, which makes them know each other. And it's this circle that happens. But it stems from the teacher planning actual tasks, things that are real for them to do in the language.
And I acknowledge that this might take sometimes a little bit more work on the teacher side, because you have to step maybe away from the unit that you have designed or from the book that you are doing. And that is fine. As you said, as long as you are really bringing something that it is relevant to them and that could serve them. My purpose in the language classroom is to show them that no matter what career they choose in the future, language is going to be handy to them. And I think this is how I try to shape the perspective in the classroom around that, so that they kind of feel that, it's not like I am not interested in literature or I'm interested in translation, then I am not studying a language. Language has more, that it helps you, in fact, understand more than just the basic communication that we could have with someone else.
That was one of the big realizations I had when I left the textbook behind. I had been teaching to the ones that might be language teachers in the future by just sticking to those things. And now that we talk about medicine and law enforcement, like all of the different things that they might use their language skills, they're really starting to see it's a world skill.
I also think that builds trust. The students then see that we trust them to actually respect their ideas and talk about their ideas. And it's not page 20 in the textbook, right? That's so important, but they're the important people in the classroom.
Yeah, going back to the Sustainable Development Goals, a couple of years ago, I started actually just planning my whole class based on that, and finding out what the kids were interested in, and then building my themes and my lessons from something that could actually be served to help the world. And I got so much more passionate about what I was doing, and so did the kids. And I've had kids come back to me and say, I went to college and two things happened. One is I found out that I was a really good speaker of the language, which they didn't realize because we just always use the language for everything. And two, they said, and I had learned so much about how to do things, how to negotiate with people, how to actually use the language for a real purpose. And it crosses over into all the other things I do. I felt like, gee, I can keep doing this for many years because my kids are getting something that they need for the world.
That's extremely important, working with the sustainable goals, because this is something that they are discussing in other classes and, with other teachers. And to see that these topics are also relevant in a language classroom. And if you are, if this is something that you really care for, it's also great to be able to advocate that cause in other languages. And I think this will bring us to our second question is, how do we really create learning experiences that require critical thinking in the classroom?
One thing that I was thinking that would work really well for critical thinking is our ranking activities. So for example, let's say you're working with vocabulary and you have a number of vocabulary concepts that you want the kids to work with. You can have them put them in order around a theme from the ones that matter to them the most to the least. And if they're, sort of novice high to intermediate or above, they can actually say why they did that as well. But even if they're just novice speakers, they can always put them in order. And that's one activity that will get you to critical thinking right away using vocabulary.
We did something similar with vocabulary like that. The students kind of did the same thing, picked their words that they wanted to learn that they were important to them. And we created topics and themes around those vocabulary words. And then we made those like little table trees with the vocabulary words, and the students came in and picked the table that was important to them. So rather than sitting with the same table group or their friends, then they were able to go and have conversations that they wanted to talk about using that vocabulary. And they could move around, kind of conference style.
Can you guys hear me again?
Yes.
All right, good, because I'm loving the conversation, but I have a question from the audience too, which kind of connects to some of the things that you've been talking about. Because you talked about task development, meaningful instruction, critical thinking. And so this is a real problem for teachers, this question. And the next question is, what do you do to create meaningful instruction for students who may have been put in class and really don't want to be there and actively stay engaged? Because what you guys talked about, of course, is great, but we all have had those students that have been put in that class and don't want to be there. And now that class means a Google Classroom or a Zoom room. And so what are your recommendations? How do you still create something meaningful for those students?
I literally had this happen just a couple years ago with a specific student who was causing me some problems. And this also gets to social justice, not about the contents about what we teach, but rather the pedagogy of how we deliver our classes and how we see our students. I felt threatened by this girl because the way she was reacting to the way that I taught didn't mesh with my style and how I perceived that she should be a learner. What it required me to do was to step back and think to myself, why is it that I, a white middle-aged teacher, think that she has to learn a certain way? And there's a lot of work that has to be done around that. 70% of the people who teach our kids in this country are white. And we bring a lot of baggage with us. I'm sure many of you are working on this right now because it's a big, important thing, equity and social justice, racial justice as well. So anyway, getting back to answering the question, what I did with her is I stepped back, I thought, and I found another teacher who was, could broker the conversation between us. And so we sat together, and if this were virtual, we'd have to do it in a Zoom meeting, but we could do it now with 3 people and have the conversation. But what I asked the student to do is I said, write on a piece of paper, and I'm gonna do the same thing. We're both gonna write on a piece of paper, what do you want to get out of Spanish? What do I want for you? What's your goal? And she showed me her goal first. Or actually, I showed her my goal first, and then she showed me hers. My goal was, I want you to pass Spanish. And her goal was, I want to learn Spanish. Those are 2 different things. And I almost started crying because so suddenly I realized she was there because she wanted to learn Spanish. She wanted it. And it changed everything about how I treated her from then on. We talked, we worked through it. It worked really, really well. Now, it's a whole different thing if you have someone who doesn't want to learn Spanish, but let's find out. That's the first thing you could find out.
I think it's always, as you mentioned, is to be able to list, to be able to get that connection with the student. And I think another way I would suggest to maybe remediate that problem or address that problem is to give that student a leadership role in the classroom, make them be leaders, make them be seen by their peers in the class as someone who is not just they don't want to be there, but someone who can contribute and they can in fact bring something to the table. And it could start by having them teach the class a game that they like and play that game, something very simple as that, but kind of sharing something they like and letting them lead the class in sort of way to tell them that we are all partner in that class. And this is what community starts. It's not just you are the teacher, I'm the teacher, you are the student, and not on top of that, you are the students who doesn't want to be there. But I value you, I respect you, and I know that you have a lot to bring to the table. And to keeping that in mind, I think it will help in addressing that situation.
Okay, then I have another question actually from the audience, I believe, and kind of expanding this idea of these tasks. How do we address equity in those actual activities? Some people might ask their students, even in the Zoom thing, to dress up, find an object around the house. But some students might not be able to engage in those activities. So what we finally figured out something, but it's still not an equitable activity. So
I would go to one idea that I'll bring here, what my colleague Leslie Grant always say, have a choice board for the students, give them options. And I think one way to go around the question of equity and access without stating that and make it even worse for the students is to in fact give them options. Try to bring, if you are suggesting an activity or something, to give them options even in the ways of what they can do, so that they can go around their situation without having to state that to the class, to their peers, or to the teacher themselves. So this is one way in fact to address it.
I think options are always a really good idea, whether it's in the classroom or even for homework, especially during the virtual time. When we went virtually last year, we didn't give grades, and we were taking attendance, but it wasn't counting for anything. So the students could not have a grade that goes down for the year. So what was the reason for them to show up in virtual class every time and do the home assignments? So I noticed the first assignment, not everybody did it. But I had one assignment. For every week after that, I had choices, and everybody did something every single week. So it was pretty amazing. Even though they weren't getting a grade for it, they chose what was helpful for their learning.
I think that's going to be particularly impactful this year if we do spend a lot more time being at home, because students may have responsibility where last year parents might have been home too because their job was closed. Now we have students who are going to need maybe a little bit more choice and leeway as they do these activities. They may have all their siblings at home, or they may be trying to work to help supplement income. So,
it's really interesting to hear all the things and the ideas that you're sharing. But I also want to point out that don't write a kid off. Like if a kid's not showing up physically, you don't see their picture when you go into your meeting, whatever platform you use, don't just think that the kid doesn't care. Think for a minute about how much of a problem it is for you sometimes to find a place in your house where you can professionally, today, for example, I'm running around my house trying to find a place where I can project from that looks professional and has good lighting and everything. Some kids might not have that. They might not have a robust connection. They might not even have a device. So that gets back to knowing your kids and making the effort to find out for every single one of them, can they equitably engage? Then if they're not showing their face, reach out to them and have a conversation and say, I see you're not showing your face. I honor that. That's okay. Can you and I together come up with some ideas so that you can engage every single time with me in class? And, as a teacher, some of the things that you can do is use your chat room. Even if they go to the breakout room, make sure that they have to at least speak. Ask for the kids to speak in every single class periods. Let them have their voice come through. And if a kid has a cruddy connection, just, say, oh, wow, I see you have kind of a bad connection. Tell them they can turn their video off because that'll give them a better audio connection, or just say, just go with it. Because the point is, as long as they're engaged, as long as they're there, they feel like they belong to a community. They feel like you care about them and know who they are, and they're going to want to keep trying and keep learning. And that's the only way they're going to actually acquire language.
To expand on that, I think it's great that you brought up the idea of voices. And I think sometimes all these activities or assignments or tasks or whatever you want to call them, it should be great sometimes if we listen and let the students, in fact, create one. And that activity comes from them, or that task comes from them, because it's going to present a different lens to their peers in the class. But also we will learn from them as teachers. I think one of the great projects that I have had in my class, they were generated by students and not by me, and that's awesome, because in fact we want them to be part of that. And to go a little bit also to the idea of equity, I think we always think equity just about like object or materials, what they can get, but there is also equity in what is it interesting for certain groups or for certain cultures, and are we just focusing on one thing that we find that it is interesting to us, again, and not listening to what students would like to share from their culture or from their perspective.
I noticed last spring that some of the students who were very lively in the classroom were not as lively in the virtual classroom. And I was surprised that their participation kind of went down, but others took over, and maybe they might have been shyer in the classroom, but they started to participate more virtually. So it was a really interesting dynamic sometimes. And sometimes I heard my colleagues saying at meetings, I don't know why we're working so hard with all of this planning. The feedback from the students or the participation from the students isn't even that great. I don't think they care. But the comments in my final course evaluations were, thanks for not giving up on us even when we weren't participating as much as we normally would do in the classroom. So I think, even if there were 4 kids who just out of a large group who just really needed to have those lessons with a teacher who still showed you cared, and it didn't matter how many students were actually raising their hand or speaking on the screen, because that took some getting used to for a lot of them.
That's actually a nice segue to another question from the audience. I think I know what the answer is, and I think I know how you all will answer this, so I'm going to add an addendum to the question. So let me read the question first, and then I'll give a little addendum. It's like a softball, but it could be really not a softball question. And the question is really, what is more important, to keep students' passion to learn world language, or to keep our curriculum structure in time? And so I'm not going to put much in here, but as you try to answer this question, I'm wondering, whatever way you go, keeping students' passion or curriculum structure time, perhaps can you give some specific strategies, since we're in the learning experience panel here, what are some strategies to do one or the other that teachers might want to explore this fall?
Passion engenders passion. So you have to be the head cheerleader, the head passionate person, and you can talk about it. You can totally geek out on how passionate you are about culture and language and everything that comes with it. And don't be afraid to tell the kids your story. How did you get to where you are today as the speaker of the language and as someone who's like bringing the culture out? Passion engenders passion.
And I totally agree with you, Liz. And I would say, and maybe people won't agree with me on this, I think in today's world, we are in the 21st century. We have technology at our hands. We see what we can do now that all schools are closed. I think if we arrive to ignite that passion in every student, I promise that they will go on their own and learn more about that language. And they have all these tools. I know people like, don't use translation, don't use this. Don't. For me, it's like showing the students how to use these tools so they can advance their learning, other than saying no and no to that and no to that. So if we ignite that passion in them, I'm sure they will reach their goal and they will surprise us.
I think that will happen even with the students that we were concerned about with the earlier question, who said, what if a student is just placed in a classroom who doesn't want to be there? Rarely do I have somebody just placed in Russian because we have a choice of 7 languages at our school. So if they're in my class, I'm lucky that they probably selected to be there. But if you show that passion and that being tied to the curriculum is not the number one goal, then I think you're going to turn around that student who got placed in your classroom.
We've had so many times that the lesson plan book said one thing, but a student comment, we just totally turned our direction another way. And those are opportunities. Like I went home that night and researched more, and we came back the next day and did something related to what the students had voiced their interest in. And it makes them feel like you're really on their team and like you care about how they learn the language and what they learn about, and their passion builds up from that.
And I think how you as a teacher, you are going to take that curriculum and weave it into their passion. I think that's the question I would like to ask. For example, like during the spring term, when all of this was happening in COVID-19 and everything, and people were more focusing on like, okay, how you are dealing with that situation, more on the I think, and then to bring that back to critical thinking and how to also. So we took that project, a colleague in my department, he started a project about, in fact, asking students to identify problems in their immediate community at home, and then come with articles that ties to these problems, and then help start a brainstorming session of how we can address these problems and what solutions we can do. So here we are advancing the curriculum. We have to put, for example, whatever curriculum or unit that we were working on the side and work with that. But we then parts of our curriculum to get it into that project. So here students, in fact, are doing real critical thinking because it's a problem that is happening now. They have to come up with a solution now and see how it is feasible, not just any solution. And at the same time, bring in those pieces. So there are ways to bring both curriculum and passion at the same time, but it might take us as teachers a little bit more work on our end.
Well, I can see the passion in your answer. So thank you for sharing that. The next question is a real, wow, that's a hard one because it's a hard problem when we're face to face. And that is, how does one balance the needs of multi-level classes with 2 different sets of yearly themes in an online learning environment?
Actually, I would argue that it's easier now. And what's easier now? Nothing. But I argue that this is easier now because the only way that virtual learning is going to be successful is if we differentiate and scaffold as much as possible. We really have to let go of this idea that level 1, level 2, level 3, it's about proficiency. So when you know your students and you know the proficiency that they have, you can tailor the learning for them so that each kid can go forward from where they are. And maybe that means you're going to have little breakout rooms with kids. Maybe that means you're going to set up appointments with them to work with them. But I would argue that this is actually a huge opportunity to be able to work with individuals.
I love what you said about moving forward from where they are, because I think that's such a key thing. I teach level 2, 3, and 4. And so I get to see kind of the continuum from where they are when they come in to, if I have them all of level 2, but then 3 and 4, I always do. So to watch them kind of grow, but also tailor what we do in the classroom so that it nurtures those ones that are kind of slow bloomers, but also provides some things that help the superstars keep shining and rising.
And I would say this is not something kind of totally new. Even in our classes before, even if everyone is on the continuum, they are at different places. And I think as long as we are always probing them to the next level, we are kind of trying to bring them together. Scaffolding is great, be able to also bring different materials at different levels to the class. And this, in fact, might inspire other students to even want to do better or increase their level of engagement in the classroom.
I'd also like to invite teachers, if you aren't familiar with the Universal Design for Learning yet, that take a minute and look it up, read it over, and think about how will I have to use this year in my virtual teaching. This is as good a time as any to learn UDL and to put it in Universal Design for Learning. I'll say it again, and put it into your teaching.
Wonderful. Well, then I want to, before we wrap up, I want to challenge you, give you a little challenge question. It's not one of the prepared questions, so we did this with the kids too, so you guys get that as well. And that is, how would you describe effective language learning in 2020 in whatever format it is, and just using 3 words? So if you only could give 3 words to describe it, what would your 3 words be? And I'll give you, George is already up, so you're ready with your 3 words, but everybody else can maybe think, process, what 3 words would you use? Maybe they're different from what you would have given me as an answer a year ago. Maybe they're not. But I would certainly be interested in what would be the words that would describe effective language learning to you. In reality, whatever that new reality is. We know it's different for everybody. We also know it's different than it was for everybody.
I'll go.
All right.
Highly engaged learners. I think that will be a key.
Okay.
Well, I had I was writing them on the little sheet of paper here. So mine are opportunity to engage. See, I had engaged too, Carrie.
And I think mine would be open to ideas, and meaning the student ideas.
I would go back to my session and say community. I think more than ever, community is what is the most important, especially now that, in fact, for some students, being able to get that window to the world when they are stuck at their home, maybe this is not what they want, maybe their homes are not the best places for them to be, and they have no other options. Finding those people online and connecting with them through language, I think that's the most important thing for me.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, then before I let you guys go, is there anything else any wisdom, any ideas that you feel like that you might picked up in the sessions that you watched, or in the session, or from your own experiences that you think people should consider as they're preparing for the new school year? And you can use more than 3 words.
I just hope teachers remain flexible and with that growth mindset, because this year is, even as much as we said last year was just this year that we'd never have anything like it, I think we're going to look back on last year and think, wow, we had 3 quarters with our students, and this year I think it's going to be hard. So listening and watching colleagues and just really focusing on trying to grow and do what's best for students and learning as we go.
To piggyback on that, I think what I would say to my fellow colleagues is that we always ask our students to be vulnerable and to be okay making mistakes, and that's the only way you learn. I would invite all of us to say it is okay to make mistakes and to model what we preach to our students. And so I think this is an opportunity for all of us to embrace that.
I also think these professional development opportunities are just amazing, and that we should all take advantage of these moments. There have been so many for, I know, teachers of Russian, and now this summer conference that we're participating in. It's inspiring me to sit here with my cup of coffee, relaxing at home, and creating those lessons for my students that I am really thinking about and enjoying, and how to make the connections with the students that I will meet only virtually for the first time ever in my life when I start school.
For me, it centers around self-care and social justice. First of all, care, meaning we had to turn education on its nose in a week, and we did it. We may not have done the best job, but you know, we didn't just utterly fail. We really didn't. We still delivered lessons. We still had teachers learn. We still were able to show the passion, and yet we're putting even more pressure on ourselves to do it better constantly. So be okay with not being perfect, just as Georges said. Take care of yourself. The second thing is, this is the opportunity, and this is the time we can make this change. The justice needs to be there. It needs to be a central part of our curriculum. If not now, when is it going to happen? Keep it in the forefront of your mind. The kids need it. They desperately, in our world, needs it.
And Liz, I think we've been given a great opportunity to do just that right now.
I think that's a good way to end it. We've been given a great opportunity. And I thank you all for sharing your thoughts today. And I'll invite the audience to continue the conversation in the comment section of this video, which will be available on the NFLC YouTube channel until August 31st. So thank you all. I really appreciate sharing some time with us. And of course, our presenters, even double thanks for sharing your sessions with us. And have a wonderful school year, whatever it will be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.